here's something pretty exciting, folks. This is happening right now. And we saw this on the Twitter sphere over the past few days. I am stoked about this. It's happening. There is a strike. So this is from the Fight for 15, which, keep in mind, Fight for 15 at this point is basically symbolic because they were fighting for $15 an hour about a decade ago when $15 an hour was an actual living wage. It's even more than that now. But the Fight for 15 is still, still a symbolic fight. So today, fast food workers across the country are striking for fair pay, union rights, and respect on the job. They're striking in 15 different cities. We'll go over to this Guardian article here. And Ted, I wanted to mention this to you first, though. I think you told me this story a while ago, but wasn't your kind of descent into like activism, didn't it start with a comedian strike? Is that true?
I like the way you call it, a descent into madness. Yes.
Yeah. That thing that ruined your life.
Yes, it's just we haven't hit bottom yet, but hopefully soon. Yeah, you're right. Actually, I didn't really consider myself an activist. Even as I was doing that, I organized the comedians in New York City for a pay raise on 2 occasions. The first time was with a petition in the early 2000s. So that was kind of on a smaller scale. Maybe we got a little over 100 signatures, but we did in fact get a pay raise. And that was kind of, before social media really had taken root. So a lot of it was just literally face-to-face getting people to sign petitions. The second time was the New York Comedians Coalition, and that was a bigger effort with Russ Maneve and Tom Shalhoub, Buddy Bolton. There were about 4 of us that were kind of the founders of the New York Comedians Coalition. And we got a second pay raise at that time. So yeah, that without realizing it, I was becoming a labor activist. And it was kind of the beginnings of me being aware of the larger issues that are so interrelated within capitalism. And then, of course, when Occupy sprang up, I was very much involved with that in New York City as well.
So here's what's going on today. We're going to go over to the Guardian, which isn't it interesting that you don't see coverage of this going on in your own corporate media. You don't see the United States corporate media saying much about this. You got to go over to other places, which I'm not going to say the Guardian doesn't have its problems. Of course they do. But they'll actually cover stuff like strikes and protests going on in the United States, unlike the actual U.S. media. They won't do that. But here's what they're saying. Hopefully it makes history. The Fight for 15 closes in on mighty win for U.S. workers. So fast food workers, they're walking out today, hoping to push through a minimum wage raise that will benefit tens of millions of people. Here's a list. They have a list of the cities going on further down here. And it's happening in California. It's happening in, here, let me see. They had a list somewhere. But it's happening, I know, California, Durham, North Carolina. It's happening in Atlanta. It's happening in Chicago. It's happening in where else? Brooklyn.
I guess those
people are walking out.
Those $2,000 checks didn't come through in Atlanta or anywhere else. So this is plan B.
Yeah, isn't that great how quick that promise just diminished? And now it's just like, hey, it's going to be $1,400 maybe. Well, it might just be, you know what? Screw it. Jill made an art project. Enjoy it and shut up. She wore a scrunchie.
Yeah, it's amazing how interrelated all these things are, right? Like if people had a $15 minimum wage going back to when you alluded to, like when this was all started, probably a decade ago, then things wouldn't be as dire as they are, and people wouldn't be as desperate to go on strike. They wouldn't be as desperate waiting on a $2,000 check as promised. But because these promises are never delivered on, people are still waiting, and these are people that are vulnerable. Obviously, folks working in the service industry, in restaurants and fast food, they're very vulnerable. So this is very courageous. Like I said, having been involved in labor negotiations and the threat of a strike, when we were the New York Comedians Coalition, there was a threat of a strike. But these folks they're in a vulnerable position where they're already in very tenuous circumstances, making, really not a living wage. So kudos to them really for amplifying that message and for going on strike, taking that step.
Well, let me ask you this. Are you a general strike guy? Do you think that's what it's going to take? Because I am a general strike stan. I stand for two things: general strike and love. That's it. Those are the only two.
You chose the right two, man. That's a good way to go.
I just
Um,
think it's the only way. Like, what else can you do at this point? You got to just shut it down.
I'm all for shutting it down. I'm not knowledgeable enough to know what that looks like and if it's feasible, and are we putting demands on the weakest? Because here are the most vulnerable, the people that are making essentially minimum wage, and where, like, they're the ones that have to go on strike. The Amazon people, they're the ones that have to, they have the most to risk because they're not even really, they're barely making ends meet to begin with.
Right.
So I think it puts a lot of pressure on the most vulnerable. But again, I'm all for it. I'm all for shutting shit down and shutting down bridges and shutting, just like whatever's going to grind capitalism to a halt. And I think a general strike is definitely a piece of that. But I'm not knowledgeable enough to know, is it a reasonable demand to put on the working people that are most vulnerable? But
So I
I
think
hope something happens.
I think that's an excellent point. The way I try to look at it is that the demand is not just on working people. The demand is on all of us. Like, the demand is on all of us, because for something like this to happen, and I don't know all the ins and out of making it happen either. I don't think anyone really does, or it would have happened by now. But like, the way I see it is, it's just like, for something like this to be successful, you need to have very extensive mutual aid. You need to have everybody doing your part. You need to have people to make sure that the kids are at school, which it's virtual school now. So to make sure they're online, to make sure they're at school, people to make sure no one becomes food insecure during this thing. Nobody becomes housing insecure during this thing. Because like you said, the system's set up in a way so that people are one paycheck away from going under. That's by design. That's why in other countries they strike a hell of a lot more. Their healthcare is not tied to their job. They're getting paid better wages so they can strike. When things aren't the way they should be, they strike. And part of it's because they're actually able to.
Yeah, and these things have been ongoing, as you said, and even like the teacher strikes these last several years. But because of the fact that U.S. media does not really cover these things in the way that they should be, or connect them in the way that they should be, this strike today is really part of an ongoing series of strikes with healthcare workers, with teachers, with Amazon workers. Striking is alive and well in the United States, but the media certainly would not let you know that. But the thing that I hold out hope for is the second half of what you stand for, love, and the unknown of what will coalesce and when will it happen. I think all of the things that people are working towards, you never know what that spark is going to be that touches things off to a larger kind of movement.
Oh, absolutely, man. And also, you bring up everything going on in labor. Simultaneously, as we're talking about this, which for anyone tuning in late, we're talking about the Fight for 15 fast food strike happening today. It's happening across the U.S. in at least 15 cities, among them Atlanta, Chicago, New York, Durham, North Carolina. And simultaneously, while this is going on, they're pushing for unionization at Amazon. Christian Smalls and some other organizers are fighting for unions at Amazon. And to hear about this stuff, you got to go to places like this, comedians talking on YouTube, because the corporate media is not going to cover it.
Yeah, and the insanity of a company that their profits have grown exponentially during the pandemic, right? Again, when workers have been most vulnerable, they've been without the basic supplies needed to work, the basic safety precautions. So they have been really on the front lines, and the company has exploded in terms of their profits. So it's just it's really it really draws into sharp focus all of the issues in American capitalism, and Amazon, of course, is at the center of all of that.
Oh man. And then you see these same tired arguments well, if workers get $15 an hour, if your Big Mac's gonna cost $40. Like, no, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. CEO pay is 475 times to one. I'll repeat that. 475 times to one. So there's a lot of other places they can cut corners. That's just one of many recommendations. That's not how it works. The price of your product is not going to go up to the point where people wouldn't be able to buy it, or they would go out of business. It's interesting how people like to point out supply and demand when it's convenient for them.
Yeah, all of the conversations around, like, first of all, like the price of a Big Mac, I can't remember the last time I ate one, so I don't even
Yeah,
know.
me neither.
Like I got shafted on a corporate gig that I did for McDonald's in like the early 2000s, and I haven't set foot. Like, they refused to pay me for close to a year, so like I just like I refused to set foot in a McDonald's, and it's been the best thing for my life. I haven't eaten there since. But yeah, this argument that suddenly a Big Mac is going to be $1,000 item or whatever, it's ridiculous, and on its face, it's absurd. So hopefully, it's these kind of movements that keep drawing attention to it, because I feel as though, as is the case with so many of these issues, the majority of Americans are squarely in favor of a $15 minimum wage, squarely in favor of healthcare, all on and on and on. But the media, as we've been saying, the through line, they don't cover it, or if they do, they don't cover it in a way that centers workers and centers that this is plausible and should in fact be the case. So hopefully momentum just continues to grow, and what's going on today is a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, it's so just kind of brutal when you just look at the surface, where we call people essential workers. Why? Because they are essential workers. And yet we just treat them like garbage. Like the corporations just treat them. I mean, you hear about people working 12-hour shifts during a time like this. People, they couldn't even be bothered to give hazard pay out near where I live, Long Beach, which isn't too far from me here in California. There's a couple, I believe it's Kroger locations that are closing because they'd rather close than give their workers hazard pay. And
It's insane.
it's unbelievable, man. It's absolutely unbelievable. And then they'll have these photo ops. They'll do these things. Hey, we're looking out for our workers. And hey, at the beginning of this thing, we gave them $1 or $2 hazard pay for 6 weeks because we wanted the nice marketing campaign. And now we're treating them like absolute garbage, even though how screwed would we be, we being all of us at this point, if we couldn't go to the grocery stores to get food at a time like this, if we couldn't go to our pharmacies to get medicine at a time like this,
Yeah,
if the distribution chain was screwed.
Yeah, I mean, propaganda is so thick around all of these types of things. Like, if you're propped up as essential or heroic in American culture, you're probably on suicide watch. Because, like, if you think about like the military, right? They're the ones that are always propped up as heroes, and yet they're disposable as far as the system is concerned. Or even cops, with all of the kind of divisive stuff around cops and defunding the police and all of that. But cops are often, their higher rates of suicide as well. And now these essential workers too, like people that kind of have these precarious existences, are very often, they're seen as disposable, really, when you get down to it, by capitalism. But they're propped up as heroic as far as the campaigning and the packaging of it goes, because what it does really is it preserves capital. All of the people that we mentioned here, whether it's imperialism around the world or cops that are protecting capitalist interests all throughout the country, or essential workers, the lip service is about the best that they're going to get from like the ownership class.
Yeah. I am for defunding the police, though. I do think we got to do that.
100%. Yeah, no, I'm just pointing out that.
No. I know what you mean. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
let's go
Abolish.
over. Yeah, no, I'm for that too. I think a lot of times when you say abolish, you gotta just really make sure you indicate what you mean by that. Because like sometimes like when you say abolish the police, people are like, well, wait, so you mean there's just no law enforcement at all? And it's like, well, no, that's not what I mean. I mean that the idea of a police officer, when you really break it down, there's no reason for it to exist. It's absolutely batshit crazy when you
Yeah.
think about what that job is. So, what we should do instead is we should reinvent how law enforcement works in our lives and what it entails. And you shouldn't just have this person with a gun who is likely poorly trained and wasn't screened at all
Yeah.
responding to every situation.
100%. Yeah. Ill-equipped and armed is not a good person to send out into all of these various types of situations.
If you just described it to someone, they would be like, why would you have a system like that? That makes zero sense. It's like, well, that's what we do, though. And some people think we should just give it more money. We shouldn't change anything.
Yes.
But yeah, defund and abolish.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your